Between the years 1825 and 1878, something terrible happened. Now remember, this lesson is called Pivotal Points in History Where We Lose Liberty. Something terrible happened. 1825, A View of the Constitution by William Rawle, and 1878, The Republic of Republics. This is the one I just encouraged you to send for, and I'll mail it to you. Between this period of time, the Republic of Republics, born March the 4th, 1789, died November the 19th, 1863. Now, we picked the date of November the 19th. It wasn't an actual death on that instant, on that day, but that's the date of the Gettysburg Address. Now, I told you the speech to Congress on July the 4th, 1861 was utter nonsense. So is the Gettysburg Address. If you read it for its content and not its poetic beauty, you actually read and say to yourself, what is he saying here? It is ridiculous. So I picked that as the date when the Republic of Republics was officially killed. George Fletcher called the Gettysburg Address what? I gave you that name. The preamble to the new constitutional order. Okay, and it is a good preamble to the new constitutional order. All before that, President Lincoln was praising and urging us to save the Union. That was in his early speeches. We must save the Union, quote, at any cost. That means we'll kill whoever we have to. Ou la mort. We will save the Union ou la mort. But then when he got to 1863 in the Gettysburg Address, what did he say? Not one word about the Union or saving it. Not a word. What was he going to save? The new nation 5 times. The nation, the nation, the nation, the nation, the new nation is what we're all about. That was where the turning point was in my viewpoint. My viewpoint being the viewpoint of reading thousands of pages. The Republic of Republics. Okay, what's this date right here? March the 4th, 1789. Why did I pick that? Why wasn't it July the 4th? The application of the Constitution began on March the 4th, 1789. The application. They actually set it up and they started following it on March the 4th. That's an important date that most of us don't know anything about. This is my dad. I asked him permission. Now this is after his hand healed. If you can see close up there, he's missing his finger. I asked him, Dad, can I use your hand? I didn't know what I was taking the picture for. I took the picture of that ugly hand all sewed up and a finger gone and a thumb massacred. I took that picture just thinking I ought to put this in my family history. I hope that's the only family member that ever cuts their hand in 2 in a table saw. So I put it in my family history. And then later I said, Dad, I want to add those pictures to my slide lecture. Do you mind if I do that? Now, I'm softening the picture now so that you're getting ready for it. I'm going to show you the hand before they patched it up. He says, son, if that'll help you, go ahead. Okay, so with his blessing, choices have consequences. Now, that's what I told you. He told me. When I asked him about his accident, he said, it's not an accident. Choices have consequences, and I made a bad choice. I didn't use push sticks when I should have.
Push sticks?
Push, not putsch. My dad is not a putschist. Thank you. For you carpenters, you'll know what I mean. 2 little sticks. They cost you nothing. They're scrap wood. And you use them to push a board through the table saw so that you don't get your hand injured. The ones my little grandson said, why didn't Grandpa use push sticks? Okay, choices have consequences. My father's helping hand. Now, if you don't like blood, close your eyes. This is after the surgeon cleaned his hand up and said it was ready for surgery, before it looked bad. Look at this hand for just a moment. His sawed his thumb completely off. His finger's totally massacred. He can't, no way to save the finger. It's completely half sliced in 2 and gone. These 3 fingers are uninjured. Now let's look at that hand and liken it to the wreckage of the Civil War. Now the Civil War was so horrible that this hand is nothing. The hand is nothing in comparison to the Civil War. You think of all the mangled bodies burned and blown up of 620,000 people, most of them teenagers, that had nothing to do with the evil of the North, and they're massacred and blown up into fragmented pieces, and hundreds of thousands more that are just crunched and mashed. So the hand is insignificant. And yet I thought that hand will help us. I had one person come up and say, never use a visual aid like that again. And I had another person come up and say, I finally have it. Your visual aid was so effective. I don't know what it'll do to you, but I found it valuable. The wreckage of the Civil War. The side that won the war wrote the history, and they made it look like this. Yeah. In history, there's a word for it. It's called whitewashing. We're going to take some unhappy subject that doesn't look good, and we're going to make it look good by whatever means is necessary. And so they whitewashed that hand, and they said, why, the Civil War freed the slaves, and it saved the Union. And after it was over, even though they violated the Constitution, after it was over, they restored the Constitution. This is the official literature, if they will even admit that much. See, my Professor Skousen, my dear friend, he said they saved the Constitution and used it to protect us and free the slaves. Huh? Wrong. As so many other great people have been wrong in trying to sort this out and tell us about it. This is the story accepted by the public. Now, whitewash, this was the front cover of the book. Who can tell me the name of the book? I love it when people learn and they have it in their head. Lies my teacher told me. James Lowen. This is the front cover. Pick up on what he's doing here. He's showing a bucket of whitewash on a U.S. history book. With other words, they're whitewashing the history. They're not telling you the truth. They're putting their bias in. They're leaving things out. That's called historical blackout. They're leaving things out. They're misrepresenting other things. And when you read it, you're going to believe their viewpoint. And Lowen says 3 out of 5 high school graduates will never read another history book in their life. 3 out of 5. That's why it's so important for the Marxist thinkers to take control of education and provide a history book that will distort their viewpoint, and they will believe that for the rest of their life. Look at the bare naked truth. This is the bare naked truth. Now you've seen this one. That's the bare naked truth. 6 weeks later, the finger is sewed up, the thumb has been repaired, restored. The Constitution has been restored, they tell us. Well, that thumb will never work again. It's just eye appeal to have his thumb still. They sewed it back on. They put these 2 big iron pins clear down into here so his thumb couldn't move for several weeks. And when the weeks were over, the thumb is useless. It moves a little bit like that, just for looks. Let's let this hand represent Reconstruction after the war. Okay, the other hand was the wreckage of the Civil War. This is Reconstruction after the war. We reconstructed the hand. Truism. A state is not sovereign when it can no longer freely choose the form of government by which it will be ruled. Have you ever heard of the sovereign state of Utah? Anybody ever use that phrase? Once in a while you hear it used. A state is not sovereign when it can no longer freely choose the form of government by which it will be ruled. Utah State Constitution, Article 1, Section 3. The state of Utah is an inseparable part of the federal union. Your great-grandfathers and grandmothers agreed to that in 1896. Are you free to choose the form of government? Are you? No. No, you're not free to choose. Your great-grandparents gave that up and said, we're inseparable. It's indivisible. Well, now the hand, not today because he passed away a year or so ago. Before he passed away, his hand was healed to this point. Now that looks like he's almost comfortable again. Life's back to normal. All of the problems of the hand have dissipated, other than he was complaining about the skin being too tight over the end of the bone here. But there's only one problem. It only looks good. We're going to call this hand the new nation. So we had the wreckage of the Civil War. We had the hand representing Reconstruction after the war, and now this hand represents the new nation spoken of in the Gettysburg Address. This thumb is the Constitution. Now, before the war, the Constitution was working pretty good, but now guess what? It's a half an inch shorter, and it's so stiff it's non-functional. It just looks good. And so we have people today that say, isn't it wonderful that we still follow the Constitution? We don't follow it. We just have one. It's just there to look at. It hangs on the wall in Washington, D.C. You can buy a pocket copy, or you can borrow one, or I'll give you one if you don't have one. You can stick it in your pocket. You can carry the Constitution around. Do we follow the Constitution? No. Now, this finger is gone. We're going to let that finger represent the sovereign states. They once existed, they once pointed the way, but they are no more. They're gone. We still have a legislative branch, an executive branch, and a judicial branch. And I used to put the legislative branch here on the big strong finger, but since then I put the legislative branch over on the little pinky, because they are not doing their duty. If they were, we would have constitutional government. They would overrule the president. They would impeach the Senate, not the Senate. They would impeach the Supreme Court. They would impeach the president. They would remove them from office, and they would put someone in that would follow the plan. But they don't. And so I put them over on the little pinky. Horace Greeley wrote in 1872. Now, he was the socialist do-gooder, editor of the New York Tribune. A mighty army, a navy absorbing nearly the whole mercantile marine, vast military stores, a martial law, a national debt, a heavy taxation, enormous dues, all things which it was long the object of all constitutional statesmen to prevent, have now been established without resistance and have transformed the government. Now, how many testimonials do we need to give you, and how many books before you will finally say, maybe I should investigate to see if those people knew what they were talking about? I've given you 3 books, 1 political caricature, and the witness of a man that lived through it, that was a devout socialist. He says our government has been transformed. 1904, George Edmunds. What was George Edmunds' real name? I love it when people listen. Last name? Good. Kind of collectively, I heard it out there. Elizabeth Merriweather was her real name. Okay, Elizabeth Merriweather. 1904, she writes Facts and Falsehoods Concerning the War on the South. There it is right there. She quoted from a general from the Union Army. And in 1887, the general wrote, "The true story of the late war has not been told. It probably never will be told. It is not flattering to our people. Unpalatable truths seldom find their way into history." That's the truth. Under the new nation established during the subjugation of the South, the Constitution became a law upon the states and not a compact between or among them. Instead of a constitution for the associated states, it became the Constitution of the United States. And that's what we call it today, the Constitution of the United States. But it is no longer a constitution for the associated states. That's quite different.
Was that language ever originally used for?
Yeah, it's in the preamble to the Constitution. It's in the preamble. Okay. Department of Education, 1867. Now this is after Reconstruction. Oh, actually, this is still during Reconstruction. 1878, they figure Reconstruction ended. So we have the Department of Education established. Now this is the beginning of the Leviathan. The seeds of Leviathan were planted, and now they're starting to grow. One of the seeds is we need to take control of education and provide free education for all children in public schools. Who said that? The guy with the long hair or the G word? Karl Marx. Free public education. So they're working on developing this wonderful program, and the NEA that I quoted earlier today, their goals in 2011, fit perfectly with the whole program of the Marxist movement. That started in 1867. The next thing they did that was significant, was a real major significance in stealing liberty, was the Interstate Commerce Commission of 1887. This became a real can of worms, and still is today, telling every state what they can do and what they can't do. So when the state of Utah says, we want a Freedom in Firearms Act, and they passed it, the federal government says, you can't do that. This is because we have the power to regulate you because of the Interstate Commerce Clause of the Constitution. Centralization of power continued to go from bad to worse. I mean, there's another 8 or 10 hours of slides in this computer if you want to see them on this subject. I can't believe it, but it's there. Let's use this beautiful stained glass window to represent God's plan for happiness. Now, on earth, God's plan for happiness includes strictly abiding by the just and holy principles of the Constitution. Where did I get that? There's several places, okay? This is my full religious belief that we must strictly abide by the just and holy principles of the Constitution. That means we're going to do what it says. The words have meaning, and we will follow their meaning. Is that asking too much? No. Now that's the symbol for God's plan for happiness, that beautiful stained glass window. This stained glass window, which also is beautiful, is the world's plan for happiness. The world's plan for happiness. Now this stained glass window is in the home of Beatrice Webb, which is now like a museum in England, in Surrey, England, and if you want to go see it, it's there. It's the world's plan for happiness as created by the social do-gooders of England who called themselves Fabians and the Fabian Socialist Society. Now, if you look close, you'll see all sorts of interesting symbology here. This man is pumping on a billows. See this rope going through these pulleys and down to the billows here? He's pumping the billows. And by the way, I've made several of those things and hung them up in blacksmith shops and using it's a really interesting way to make air move. And this is the forge, and they have just heated the world. Here's the world over here. What's this? That's the anvil. This is my profession. This is the one thing I know something about. And they're beating on the world with these big black hammers. This is George Bernard Shaw, this is Sidney Webb, this is H.G. Wells, this is H.G. Wells, this is Edward Pease. These people have names. They are the social reformers of England that are going to enculturate the young into their social and political democracy. That's who these guys are. Now, this guy here, he's not cooperating. What's he doing? When I was a kid in school, I don't know how vulgar this is anymore, but they'd go, yeah, 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 yeah. And that was supposed to really mean, I don't agree with you, I don't like what you're doing. That's what he's doing. See it right there? He's yeah-yeahing at them with his thumb on his nose. H.G. Wells didn't agree with how they were proceeding toward their socialist program. You know, like a debate between the school board not agreeing upon how we will have the enculturating take place. What are these guys doing down here, the rest of them? They're worshiping. What are they worshiping? Well, they're worshiping at a stack of books. And if you look close, you can read the titles on the books. Plays 1, pleasant. Plays 2, unpleasant. Plays for Puritans is the third one down. They're going to have a play for everybody. This is like Hollywood using the movie as a way of enculturating you into their society. Okay? Now down on the bottom. Down on the bottom, can you read it? Fabian Tracts and Essays. I read it years ago. Years ago when I was under the leadership of that grand old man, Cleon Skousen. Read yourself full and speak from the overflow. I read it. Okay, it looks like this. Fabian Essays in Socialism. Edited by George Bernard Shaw. Major Principles of Socialism. Now, I haven't read it since then. But at that time, I wrote down my notes. Since it was checked out from the library, I had to write them on a separate piece of paper. I wrote down my notes, and I will now give you the summary of what I found in that book. These are the points of socialism. This is what they said we need to do to implement socialism. The government should own or control, and the key word here is control. Own or control the land. Your horses are overgrazing the range. We will remove your horses by coercion and let the gold miners mine it. Okay, the government should own or control the land. Now what's the black up here? What's the white? The black is the land owned by the federal government, not the states. It's the land owned by the federal government, and guess what? They now own more. The map is obsolete because there's more black area now because they continue to encroach upon the land. This is the state of Nevada, and now the number is larger than 87. It's now, they tell me, about 93, the last time I lectured in Ruby Valley, Nevada. Are we having fun yet? We are, aren't we? Learning's exciting. Okay? Now, the second goal of socialism I obtained out of reading that essay, government ownership or control of the major industries. Oh, wouldn't it be wonderful if we just controlled I heard what percentage of the banking system we own today. I heard it on the news this morning. Something like 73% of one of the nation's largest banks. The federal government owns it. That's a controlling interest. So we should control the industry, whatever it may be. Oil, I mean, we don't want more oil wells. I mean, after all, that would corrupt the environment. So well, no more oil wells, no digging in the Gulf, no digging in Alaska, and on down the host of things that they do to control the industries. Control labor. My, oh my. Each of these is worth an hour. We'll give them 10 seconds. Control or ownership of communications and transportation. Government control of all credit. Oh, you know, when I was a boy, $1 million was a lot of money. We heard about $1 million. Man, you want to say, thanks $1 million. That was a lot, you know. But now I think you're a cheapskate if that's all the thanks you have. It ought to be at least thanks $1 trillion. Government control of all credit. Government control of insurance. Just think about the blessing in your life of government insurance programs. Government control of the educational system. Just think about the NEA and their goals and objectives. Elimination of the significance of the family. Gay goes mainstream. Now this old stuff, this is in 1910 that they're writing these wonderful goals down that they have in England for the people of England. Elimination of the significance of religion. What's they doing here? Yeah, they're going to take the 10 Commandments from Judge Roy Moore's courthouse. We can't have the 10 Commandments there, the Supreme Court said. Why, somebody might read them and follow them. That's a direct quote from a Supreme Court case removing the 10 Commandments from a school. Somebody might read them and follow them. Establishment of a minimum wage. What is the minimum wage today? Anybody know? I don't know. It was $7.25 they were trying to get back when Edward Kennedy was raving about it. Establish a minimum wage. A universal systems of pensions. I can't wait till my next Social Security check comes. And justified use of force if necessary to attain these socialistic goals. George Bernard Shaw, 1910. And he says, and if the people don't like it and don't accept it, we may have to kill them. Yeah, that's George Bernard Shaw. Do whatever is necessary to see that these socialistic goals are obtained. Now I'm going to add one more that he didn't include, but it's very pertinent. It's in Karl Marx's Communist Manifesto. Graduated income tax. How will we pay for all this? Oh, we'll have a graduated income tax. But it turned out that didn't turn out to be the main source of paying for it. The main source, it appears to me, is robbery through the Federal Reserve System. And the robbery is taking place. For example, when I was born, my mother and father could put $1 into piggy bank and save it for me. And that was customary in those days to save for their little children. And we had a piggy bank and it was for me. They would put money in the piggy bank and save it for me. Had I held it until now, how much would my dollar be worth in buying power? 2 cents. They stole my dollar. They took it without ever breaking the piggy bank by inflation. Well, in this particular quotation, this guy here was the leader of the Internal Revenue Service when I took this slide, and he said in his newspaper, quote, "Tell us where you are and we'll send you money." Yeah, this is all part of the socialist program of George Bernard Shaw in Fabian, England in 1910. Does any of that sound familiar? All of it. This is socialism. This is what it is. And your friends and your neighbors have bought in and they cheerfully accept all of the elements of socialism, and then they say, "We don't want socialism. That would be terrible." Now, we get a little closer view of the window. What's going on right here? They're beating on the world. When you beat on a piece of iron, you're not trying to destroy it. You're reshaping it. And at the top of the window, in fact, right up here, if you could see it, it says, "Remold it nearer to the heart's desire." So they're going to remold the world. Oh, we'll just shape the world to our heart's desire. And their heart's desire is expressed in their socialist goals. And here they have their coat of arms, right here. That's the coat of arms they chose for themselves when they created this window in 1910 in honor of the socialist movement. What is that? A wolf in a sheepskin. Yes. They said, let's do it cautiously and slowly, carefully, like a wolf in a sheepskin. There's one more symbol that they had at that time. This is a tortoise with a dragon's head. Now, this is the former president of France, and they're in conversations about the European Union. This is several years ago. And each morning when they came to gather and discuss how they would establish the European Union, he would set the tortoise out there, a ceramic tortoise with a dragon's head. This symbolizes the method they will use. The method they will use to, who can repeat the three things that the Illuminists wanted to accomplish? Destroy the Christian religion, overturn the existing government, and replace it with the Great Society. And we will do it so gradually that the people will not become alarmed and get involved. That's the tortoise with the dragon's head. We call this evolutionary socialism, in contrast to revolutionary socialism, such as they had in the Soviet Union. Summary: the free and independent sovereign states have long since been completely eradicated. The Constitution has been mangled. The legislative branch has shriveled from its constitutional responsibilities. The executive and judicial branches have greatly expanded their powers by usurpation. Socialism destroys liberty and is Satan's counterfeit for God's revealed plan for happiness. Now, notice this is a very credible source. No historian said that. I wrote that myself. They don't quote me. Nobody knows Stephen Pratt. Okay. That's the end. I believe it is. It is. That's the end of the slides. We have accomplished what I thought we would do in an hour. It took us an hour and a half or so. We have 50 minutes left. What should we do with those precious minutes? We have two answers and interaction. That would be so fun. I would love to hear you and hear you discuss. I would like to sit by the side and just listen as you decide what's next. I always seem to usurp all of the time. That's the way it is. I have another one, thank you. I am a carpenter, somewhat of a machinist, a blacksmith. I can do a few other skills that relate to my profession of making old-fashioned things. But one of the things we must have with every skill is a standard by which to measure the things we're working with. Politics is no different. We need a standard by which to measure political issues and candidates and the choices they make. That's the theme of this lesson. Do you recognize any of these faces? Yep. Yeah. How about these? Well, you say all of them, but there are a few there. Who's this guy? You know, I don't care. Who's this guy? There are a few guys. What do they all have in common politically? There's one that I love up there, and that's this guy right here. Okay, I love that guy. He is my hero. He's the only one up there I hold in high respect. They're all running for president. Now, some are running for president as socialists and libertarians and other parties, but that's what they all have in common. They're all candidates running for president on some political party. They've all filed, they all are giving speeches and so forth. Some more speeches than others. Now, this gentleman I never met. I simply know that he wrote a rebuttal to one of my speeches in Idaho. This is the rebuttal. It's a beautiful piece, well done. He includes more official literature than any other statement of 250 words or less. You see, it was a letter to the editor, and he had to keep it down to 250 words or less. And so his letter to the editor includes this statement. Scholars just 1 week ago affirmed, yet again, Abraham Lincoln as the greatest president in the nation's history. Now, scholars affirmed. What does that mean when scholars affirm something? That must be true. That's what it means. I mean, they wouldn't be scholars if they didn't tell the truth. I don't profess to be a scholar. If anybody asks me, what do you do for a living, Mr. Pratt? Well, I'm a blacksmith of sorts, but I'm not a very good one either. I make things with my hands, and my son keeps saying, Dad, you've got to do better than that. I have a hard time competing with my son. My skill is not up to his. I'm serious. This is what it is in the shop. Dad, we can't let that out yet. You have to put another coat of oil on and rub it more. Okay, son. We turn out beautiful work, thanks to him. Okay, so scholars said something. So what? That's what I've learned to say. I don't care what they said. What is the truth? That's what we really want to know. This man is a scholar. He's just as much a scholar as that man. They both went to university. They both got a PhD in some subject that relates to what they're bragging about. What does he say? And by the way, I really like this guy, Thomas D. Lorenzo. According to American historians, scholars, the best presidents are the ones who get us into the biggest wars, impose the most interventionist economic policies, and trample civil liberties by expanding executive power beyond what the Constitution permits. That's why Lincoln and FDR are always at the top of the list. Now, this guy's telling the truth. He then praises a book called Recarving. This is the front cover of the book. Recarving Rushmore. Now, any of you been to Rushmore? Does it look like this right here? Where are these faces? If you go today and look at Rushmore, is that what it's going to look like? No, this is an artist's conception of how it ought to look. And so Ivan Eland, and again, I enjoy Ivan Eland's writing immensely. Don't agree with him on lots of things, but he does a great job of pulling together history. 2009, excellent read. I commend it to your enjoyment. Recarving Rushmore is not about one president, it's about 40 presidents. Each president has a standard applied to their service as president, and measuring their service by a standard. Then they give a rank or rating, and that's his theme of his whole book. 40 chapters, 40 presidents. Now, in the 2009 book, it ranks presidents by what they did to promote peace, prosperity, and liberty by following the Constitution during their presidency. Now, we're not ranking them before or after. Just because Thomas Jefferson wrote the Declaration of Independence, that doesn't change his rating as president. You follow the concept? We're going to rank them as president and the choices they made according to a standard. Now, this is another book. Here, the presidents are considered according to what they said. Now, this book's about what they did. This book's about what they said. Is there any difference between the two? Oh, yes. The Wit and Wisdom of the American Presidents, a book of quotations. Now, the author undoubtedly put the presidents on the front cover that had the most wit and wisdom. I'm sure that that's how they would have been chosen. Out of the 40 they could have chosen, they have placed 10 on the front cover, and they will be 10 filled with wit and wisdom. That's what I expect. Now, Rachel Dawes got in here. Rachel Dawes made this wonderful quote. I read it in the magazine. I don't know who Rachel Dawes is. I don't even know who Bruce Wayne is. But I found out later that one is Batman and the other one is some famous lady in the show, which I've never seen. But nevertheless, Rachel Dawes, she is standing on top of a building protecting this little innocent child, and Batman is looking down, and down in the city below they see all sorts of crime and corruption. And Rachel turns to Batman and she says, "It's not what you say that counts, it's what you do that defines you." Oh, Batman's got to do something. He can't just look down on the crime. And so Batman leaps off the roof, and as he's sailing down, Rachel can hear him muttering under his breath, "It's what you do that defines you." And he gets down there and he whomps on the bad guys. Okay. We have a book of what they did, and we have a book of what they said. And it's what they did that should define them, not what they said. What they did, what they said. Now let's do something fun. It is not what they said, but what they did to promote peace, prosperity, and liberty that defines them. Let's take this book and these 10 presidents, and we'll take Ivan Eland's book and we'll put the rankings on these 10 that the woman chose by what they said. And we'll see how they rank. Now there are 40 presidents in the ranking. 2 of them didn't have enough time in service. They died and so on before they got served very long, so they didn't get ranked. Okay, you can recognize hopefully the faces. Who's the one on the top left right here? Okay. Theodore? Woodrow? FDR? Truman? Kennedy. Okay, you got them. Now, what is their ranking? We're going to start from the highest to the lowest. Who gets the best ranking up here, and what number should it be? Oh, you're going to all vote for George Washington being a better president than all the others? Yes. Even above Lincoln? Yes. Oh boy, this is a warped audience. Well, George Washington, if you examine what he did as president, he get place number 7. That means there were 6 other people that did a better job of following the Constitution than George Washington. Now, who do you think's next? Ulysses S. Grant got rank number 19 by what he did to follow the Constitution and promote peace and liberty. That's the next highest on this book. Now, there are only 40, and so 20 would be halfway. Everything below 20 means that they were in the bottom half of the presidents. Who's the next one going to be? Who's going to get the next place, and what might it be? Well, how about Theodore Roosevelt with ranking 21? Really? Now, 21's a very poor score, by the way. That's a terribly poor score. That means there were 20 presidents better than he was. And then it comes John Adams with 22, Thomas Jefferson at 26. That just irritates me no end. It makes me angry. He's my hero. He should have got a higher score. He should have done a better job. Abraham Lincoln gets 29. Oh, but scholars said last week that he was number 1. Which scholars and what standard did they use? 31 to FDR, 35 to Kennedy, 39. There's only going to be one left. What score does Woodrow Wilson get? Number 40. Ivan Eland said of all the presidents, he did the poorest job in restoring and preserving liberty. My, oh my. Now, isn't that interesting? This is when you apply a standard. Now, the standard is a bit subjective. He has to make choices, and you might have used his standard and given a few, a little different to the ratings. But the concept is that we need a standard, and we can then measure choices. It's the choices they made that determined their position in the presidencies. Who's this villain? Well, that creep, he looks like some slob from Skid Row, or maybe on death row getting ready to be hung for child molestation. I mean, isn't that what this looks like? Who knows who this guy is? Nobody knows who he is. He just happened to get number 1. He got number 1 on the Peace, Prosperity, and Liberty ranking, and you don't even know his name. John Tyler. Exhibited restraint. He limited the money supply. He opposed high tariffs. He opposed the National Bank. He fought members of his own party. He knew he would lose the next election, And he still fought members of his own party to accomplish limited government. He was a hero. And we don't... Pardon?
He wasn't assassinated.
No, he didn't get assassinated. No, he just lost the next election because he was so strong on supporting liberty that they wouldn't elect him again. Now, John Tyler got PP&L, means peace, prosperity, and liberty by following the Constitution. He got #1 ranking. Who's this guy? Oh, good, good. You caught that quick. Now, I'm going to put a face up there and I want you to tell me the story. What's the story? Okay, what are the words? Somebody give me the exact statement. Good, good. We all know that, don't we? And all my life, I judged this president based on that statement. That's all I had for a standard. Why, he must be a geek because he said, your cause is just, but I can do nothing for you. Well, guess what? And that's the exact quotation. By the way, it's a hearsay quotation. Nobody really knows if he said it. It was written later on, and it suggested that he said it. The rest of the statement was supposed to be, if I take up for you, I shall lose the vote of Missouri. Well, he really is a slob now, isn't he? I mean, he must be a real, I won't use the G word again. PP&L ranking #3 for his promotion of peace, prosperity, and liberty by following the Constitution. And Ivan Eland said, I would have given him score #1, but he treated the Indians in a manner that wasn't appropriate, and so he gets #3 instead. And that's why John Tyler beat him out. Really? Maybe there's more to judging a person than one feeble statement. Now, feeble, I say, because this statement, your cause is just, but I can do nothing for you, he is quoting his responsibility from Article 4, Section 4 of the Constitution, which says the president is not allowed to go into a state with military power unless he's invited by the state government, specifically the state legislature, and if they're not in session, the governor must invite the president in before the president can take military threat and into a state. Huh? That's in the Constitution? It is. And so I learned, last week or 3 weeks ago, whenever it wasn't very many years ago, I learned that this man followed the Constitution by telling Joseph Smith, your cause is just, but I can do nothing for you. Now, he maybe could have done some lobbying, or, gone to the state governor and had a conversation, but he could not take military power into the state of Missouri and still be following the Constitution. He could not. That's interesting. If you can name #2 president, I'll be surprised. Who got #2 in the rankings? Coolidge did good. He got #10 or 11 right there. Wasn't Coolidge? He was the only president. No, he was. I love some of these presidents that we don't know anything about. Why don't we know anything about Millard Fillmore? Because he stayed home in the White House and minded his own business. It's only the warmongers that we hear about. And that's the kind that get these high ratings. Oh, he took us in and saved the Constitution by fighting and killing thousands of people or hundreds of thousands. No. These people that stayed home and minded their own business followed the Constitution. Cleveland. Thank you, Grover Cleveland. You get a star. Or something better than that, maybe. Grover Cleveland did a great job. A standard is any figure or object, especially a flag or banner, used as an emblem or symbol of a people. Now, the flag or banner we were talking about, the standard of America is a flag. It's our standard, a flag or a banner. There were a variety of standards that were suggested and used, and see, these are some of the famous ones. This is from a very old history book in 1885, and we eventually chose a standard. Now, this was one of the suggestions. Don't tread on me. I went into the store recently, the flag store, and I says, I'd like to buy a Don't Tread on Me flag for my son. He says he wants it for his birthday. Now, my son's 35 years old. Why would my son want to hang the Don't Tread on Me flag up? And the store man said, man, that's the hottest selling item in this store. We are really selling them like hotcakes. And this is Provo, down here in Provo. They're really selling Don't Tread on Me flags. I just thrilled to hear that. Here's another version of it. Liberty or death, don't tread on me. Now, this is the standard we use, and to the republic for which it stands. Now, the republic is defined. Our standard is not just a piece of cloth that flops in the wind and we're pledging to a piece of cloth. In fact, I don't even like the pledge, and we discussed that earlier. The pledge is written by a socialist do-gooder named Jeremy Bellamy. And indivisible was a concept from the crushing of the South. But we won't get into that right now. Okay? Let's just deal with this word right here. And to the republic. See, people say, you know, what kind of a government? Oh, we have a democracy. Well, you just stood up just a few minutes ago before you started the meeting and you had a pledge of allegiance and you didn't pledge to a democracy. Well, we did. I mean, well, that's just the pledge. What is this republic? Would you believe there are more than 6,000 words defining the republic? More than 6,000 words in the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution, and the Bill of Rights. 6,000 plus words explaining in detail that republic. Oh. And so when you read those 6,000 words and another 9 or 10 or 20,000 pages or whatever it takes to understand our system, pretty soon when you say the republic, it has meaning. I know what a republic is. And if you want to order the book, The Republic of Republics, you can learn from that great history book what it is also. It's the best one I know of for a single book. 550 pages with what? Fine print and no pictures. Standard. Something established for use as a rule or basis of comparison in measuring or judging content. Our security is in the possession of a written constitution, a written standard. Our Constitution is our written standard. Our written Constitution is a legally binding contract. A compact is, the Noah Webster definition is quite long, and he's defining the word compact. And at the end, the last sentence is, so the Constitution of the United States is a political contract between the states. Not between the states and the federal government. It's a political contract between the states, and that contract is the contract that created the agency we call the federal government. How the Constitution developed. Deliberation at a convention of states, a verbal agreement, a written contract, a compact, which is an agreement between the states, and the compact constitutes our plan of government and is called our Constitution. This is all out of Noah Webster's 1828 dictionary. It's good reading. In questions of power, then, let no more be said of competence in man, but bind him down from mischief by the chains of the contract. That's what Jefferson's talking about. This Constitution's a contract, a written contract between the states. Article 2, before he enter on execution of his office, he shall take the oath. I do solemnly swear or affirm that I will faithfully execute the office of President of the United States and will to the best of my ability preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States. Article 6, Clause 2, an oath. This Constitution shall be the supreme law of the land, and the judges in every state shall be bound thereby. They're going to take an oath to support the Constitution. Article 6, Clause 3, the senators and representatives, before mentioned, and the members of the several state legislatures, and all executive and judicial officers, both of the United States and of the several states, shall be bound by oath or affirmation to support this Constitution. Now the word this, I highlighted it right here. Which Constitution are they going to support? How about the phantom Constitution, which is the figment of the imagination of the Darwinian judges back in Washington, D.C.? Isn't that the one they're really supporting? That's the one they're really supporting. Which one are they swearing to support? This Constitution. Now, that's an important word, this. That means not another figment of imagination. So here they are taking the oath in this group of Congress. They have their hand up, they're swearing an oath. They're bound by oath. Now this is a senator, he was a congressman when I took this picture. He was taking the oath on what book do you suppose? Isn't that common? Isn't that interesting? You can't take an oath as an atheist. It's worthless. An oath as an atheist has no meaning. If you don't believe there's a judge after this life and he will judge you according to the righteousness of your intentions, you can't take a meaningful oath. It'll be like taking an oath on the stack of encyclopedias or the Reader's Digest. I do solemnly swear with my hand on the Reader's Digest that I will always be a good and gentle servant of the public. No, that doesn't work. So here he is, taking an oath on the Bible. By the way, his name is Bernie Sanders, and I kind of like the guy. Every once in a while, Ron Paul strikes up a relationship and they have some law they try to get passed together. Bernie Sanders. Now, perjury. We need the definition before we can go on. Perjury is the breaking of an oath or formal promise. Okay? Now, Judge Bork, he makes this point. The word this, he emphasizes how important the word this is, that they're pledging or swearing to uphold this Constitution. That would mean, if they didn't support this Constitution, contrary to the text, that federal judges are not bound, and all other classes of persons mentioned are bound to the judges and not to this Constitution. Now, I realize that's a little confusing without reading the whole thing. Let's try again. They're going to swear to uphold this Constitution. But if the judges are not bound by this Constitution, if they can just use judicial review and implied powers and make the Constitution anything they want, then the rest of the people are binding themselves to the judges, because the judges are telling us what the Constitution is. And so Judge Bork's trying to help us understand how silly that is. That would mean, contrary to the text, that federal judges are not bound, and all other classes of persons mentioned are bound to the judges. Is that the way it was meant to be? No. A majority of the Supreme Court judges during the past 50 years have invented a constitution that no one drafted. I wonder where these people get these numbers, 50. Why was it 50? Why not 49 or 63? Well, there's somebody else. His name's Senator Mike Lee. I listened to him speak here in Pleasant Grove before he was elected, and he stood up at the podium and declared 70 years ago the government began violating the Constitution. And afterwards I said, where'd you get the idea of 70? Oh, it was a Supreme Court case of, and he named some Supreme Court case where they started violating the Constitution. You wacko, you don't know what you're talking about. I didn't say that out loud. And then there was another speaker got up, and his name was Morgan Philpott. And Morgan, same meeting over here at the one of the schools over here in Pleasant Grove. He says, the government began violating the Constitution shortly after its ratification. Congratulations, Morgan Philpott. That's correct. Who was the first big violator of the Constitution? George Washington. Yeah, that's why he scored number 7 on the rankings, because he didn't follow the plan. As good as a person as he was, goodness is not good enough. I think we can even pull a scripture out on that. There are qualifications for a person who's running for office, and we don't want to elect them unless they meet all 3 of the criteria. They should be good, that's important. Wise. Good, honest, and wise, in that order. And you know, the word wise is mentioned twice, but not good and honest twice. They just get one time. Good, honest, and wise, wise. You see, good isn't good enough, honest isn't good enough. You have to have them coupled with wisdom. What do we think about? What do you think about the federal assumption of individual state debt incurred during the Revolutionary War? What do you think about that? Let's try the next one. What do you think about Congress approving a national bank during George Washington's presidency? What do you think about 13,000 troops invading Pennsylvania led by George Washington and Alexander Hamilton during the Whiskey Rebellion? What do you think about the Sedition Act and President John Adams' appointment of midnight judges, including John Marshall? What do you think about this? What do you think about the evolution and destruction of the original Electoral College? By the way, this book's on the back table. It is excellent reading. Get a copy. There's a whole stack of them. I can see them from here. I brought 100, and so you probably already have one now, but it's good reading. Carolyn Alder sat right there last night. She and her husband created this book. She whispered to me with happiness, we just won an award. This is just a mom and pop home operation. He's a computer geek. Yeah, I can use the word there appropriately, see? He's a computer geek, and she is a housewife. And together they wrote this wonderful treatise, fine scholarship, The Evolution and Destruction of the Original Electoral College. Well, what do you think about that? Before you can think about something, you have to have something to think with. I just named 5 important subjects, and the average citizen doesn't have any clue what we're talking about because they have nothing to think with. They have done no homework. Which constitution is our standard? There's more than one? Well, we've learned today that they changed the Constitution's meaning to where it has a completely different meaning now. Which Constitution? The Constitution of the United States as ratified and correctly amended? Or the phantom Constitution invented by the living constitutionalist? Now, we're going to have 2 covers here, and they're going to become bar graphs for us. This is the real Constitution. This is the symbol we're using for it, this George Washington cover on our... By the way, we've almost completed the distribution of 8 million of these. 8 million. And this cover over here, I invented the cover so we'd have a cover for the phantom Constitution, the one that we're following today. And here we have Justice Brennan, and he's throwing the Constitution over here. He's throwing it in the garbage, and he says, this junk was obviously written by a bunch of right-wing kooks. Okay, now those are the 2 covers. We're going to use those as a bar graph. On the back table, be sure and take a free handout. It's this handout right here, the Phantom Constitution, and you'll enjoy reading that short essay. Read it. 24 hours from now, you'll have that digested. Now, the Phantom Constitution, I wrote this about 25 years ago. I think I said to myself, I need a short, concise statement of what's contained. What are the elements by which we govern ourselves? And so I wrote this, a long time ago. Article 1, we the people of the United States authorize Congress to do whatever they think is necessary and proper for the private benefit of any special interest group, either foreign or domestic. The only restrictions on Congress will be the restrictions which they may choose to place upon themselves. Okay, that's where we are today. That's where it is. Article 2. The executive power shall be vested in a president who is empowered to do anything not strictly prohibited by this Constitution. I didn't invent that language. Theodore Roosevelt did. He said, I have the power to do anything that is not strictly prohibited by this Constitution. Is that true? No, it's just the opposite of that. He only has authority to do that which is in the Constitution. Article 3, the judicial power of the United States shall be vested in one Supreme Court which shall act as the living Constitution. What they say is what the Constitution means. And now there's an Article 4. The federal bureaucracy shall serve as the 4th branch of government to establish laws through the use of the Federal Register. They shall have the power to make the laws, interpret their laws, and to enforce their laws at each bureau's own discretion. This is where it is today. The Boy Scout manual that I showed you on citizenship in the nation, it says the laws are made by Congress and does a beautiful job of correctly showing how Congress passes a law. And I wrote a marginal note that said, why don't they tell the truth? And that was another place the girls would have walked out had they not already walked out, shouting heresy and so forth. The Boy Scout manual, by blackout, leaves out the rest of the story. Where are most of the laws made that we are forced to follow? They're made in the 4th branch of government by the bureaucracy, entered into the Federal Register. Thousands and thousands of unconstitutional laws. 80,800 pages in 1 year. That was the year 2002, as I recall. That's the only year I have the number on. You can probably Google it and find how many are in this year or last year. Now, oath versus voting record. I pulled out an old lesson I gave about 5 years ago, and I put one slide or two in from that lesson. The New American at one time called their index, their method of judging, showing how the incumbents vote. They call it the conservative index. Now, December the 12th, 2005, the conservative index rates congressmen based on their adherence to constitutional principles of limited government. Preserving our Constitution is what the word conservatism once meant and how it is being applied here. Now, they since changed the name because nobody knows what a conservative is anymore. It's completely mixed up. Nobody has any idea what that is. And so now they call it the Freedom Index instead of the Conservative Index. But catch it here. The conservative index rates the congressman based on their adherence to the constitutional principles of limited government. If they followed the Constitution when they cast their vote, they get a good score. If they didn't follow it, they get a bad score. Okay, now we're going to take a quick look at a few of our senators and congressmen as we look at the standard. This is in 2005. Utah, Hatch, 30%. Now that's 30% in support of the Constitution. 30%. Bennett, 30%. Where'd the 70% go? What'd they do the rest of the time? The rest of the time they followed the phantom Constitution, the figment of the imagination of a bunch of nonsensical people who don't know what they're talking about. Now, I like Vermont because Vermont is the letter right after U, V in the alphabet. You know, U, V, X. How does that go? I forgot. Anyway, Vermont is next, and Vermont has a 10% score. Oh, that makes Hatch look really good, doesn't it? Yeah, Hatch is a conservative. This is a real liberal down here. We hear that, don't we? Don't we say Senator Hatch is a conservative? It's a good thing we have a conservative senator back in Washington because he's supporting and upholding our liberty. Well, let's look at the facts and apply a standard, a measuring standard by which to measure issues, candidates, and so forth. Now, Jeffords, oh, he must really be far out. He gets a 0. That means he never voted for constitutional principles once, not even once, on 20 issues. Now, how many scored 0? Well, in the House, 12 Republicans got a 0, and 4 Democrats got a 0. That's in 2005. In the Senate, 18 Democrats got a 0, and an independent got a 0. Now, that's interesting, isn't it? Don't you love statistics on Saturday afternoon when you're groggy with sleep and you ate too many Subway sandwiches, and now we're talking statistics? How many scored 100%? 1. Just one person voted constitutional every time. And he has always done that from the first time I ever met him. I was lecturing in Texas to an audience no bigger than this, and just like that gentleman in the pink shirt, is that pink or orange? Orange. Just like that gentleman in the orange shirt, Ron Paul walked in the door. Well, some of them recognized him. I didn't. I didn't even know who he was. I wasn't from Texas. Somebody said, oh, Congressman Paul, good to see you today. And like I told you about stepping aside for for President Ezra Taft Benson, I stepped aside for Congressman Ron Paul. And he came up, that was his first term, just brand new at it. A medical doctor who decided to serve his country in the House of Representatives. He won the election somehow, and he gave a talk on how evil the Federal Reserve System is. This is in 1976, and I've loved him ever since. After the meeting was over, we went over to someone's home, and the rest of the night we talked. Had a great time. 100% from then until now. Thomas Jefferson of modern times. Comparing candidates, this is the New American Magazine, does a great job every quarter approximately, or every half a year. They put in a comparison, how the candidates and how the incumbents, how they're voting back in Washington. You can Google it on newamerican.com. They call it the Freedom Index, a congressional scorecard based on the United States Constitution. Now, I use Bernie Sanders. I say, Bernie Sanders is our index here. I like Bernie Sanders because he's right beside Utah. And I can look at Bernie Sanders, and there's something special about him. He is a senator now. He's moved from the House to the Senate. His score is 30%. Does that sound familiar? You know any other senators that got 30% in support of the Constitution? Yes, I do, back in 2005, but they've repented since then. Now they've become conservatives. So notice 30% for, 70% in support of the phantom Constitution, but here is the unique feature about this man. He's not a Democrat, and he's not a Republican. What is he? He is independent, and he openly says, I am a socialist. See right there? I am a socialist. If you want a socialist, vote for me. And we can look at Bernie then, and we can say, this is how a socialist would vote. Oh. So if he is a socialist, we can compare other people to him, and we'll see how they compare to a socialist. Really? Now this is 2007. 2005, he got 30%. That's an improvement. He was 30% in 2005, and he's 31% in 2007. Well, we can say, how many years will it take before he finally follows the Constitution? We could figure that out mathematically. Oh, take a look at a few more of them here. Now, this is their score in 2007, 37%. You know this guy? Ever hear him before? Presidential candidate, 40%. Great conservatives. Oh, she was never called a conservative. She was called a liberal. And she gets 19%, 13%. That's our president today. These are when they were senators. That's our vice president today. Who did we elect? This is our representative in 2007. He's since lost his job, thank goodness. 69%, 66%. And you say, oh, those are outstanding scores. Did you ever go to school and they graded you on papers? And what was a D? What was the percentage you got to get a D? It was less than 70%. Oh, anything less than 70 was a D. That's called poor when I went to school. Okay? So isn't he doing great? He's getting 66%. That's poor. Oh my, that's our Utah Democrat, 28%. Perjury. Oh my, how did that word come up again? Perjury is the breaking of an oath or formal promise. To the mentally awake and morally straight, applying the standard of this Constitution, did the senators and representatives listed above break their sacred promise to follow the constitutional contract? Yes, they did. What are they guilty of? Perjury. That's not too strong. Let's just be honest about it. They violated their oath. They're guilty of perjury. What is the breaking of an oath or formal promise called? You've got that answer already. Perjury, number one. Now, arrogation of powers. I don't know what this word means. I saw it somewhere. My friend says, I said, isn't that what farmers do? No, he said, that's usurpation, stealing power. It's usurpation. Arrogation means taking power that you don't have. To claim or seize power without right. An unwarranted assumption of power. These senators are guilty of an unwarranted assumption of power. They took it without authorization. Arrogation of powers. Now there's a third and even more difficult one. How did that get in there? Compact. So the Constitution of the United States is a political contract between the states. Treason. In the Constitution it defines treason. Treason is the offense of attempting to overthrow the government of the state to which the offender owes allegiance. Now catch the language. This isn't in the Constitution. This is just the definition out of Webster's dictionary of that year. Treason is the offense of attempting to overthrow the government of the state to which you swore allegiance. Do you mean those senators have an allegiance to a state? Well, they're United States senators. They only have an allegiance to the United States government. True or false? False. They swore to uphold the Constitution and they're going to defend their state. And treason is when they don't support the state that they swore to uphold. Senators, 2007. What do we know about them now? They're guilty of perjury, perjury, arrogation of powers, and did they uphold the state governments that they swore to uphold? No. They violated the Constitution. They all swore an oath to uphold the contract between the states, and they did not. Non-performance of the oath is the commission of perjury, arrogation of powers, and treason. The commonness of such sins in no way abates their enormity. Front page of the USA Today, July 5th, 2010. What is the Tea Party? A growing state of mind. Now, that was an interesting article. I tend to like Tea Party people and get invited to speak to their groups and quite enjoy them. Some of them are just as ignorant as the common citizens out on the street about their country, but they're good mind and good desire to have better government. What is the Tea Party? A growing state of mind. Faith in the Founding Fathers is a signature of the movement. The founding documents are gospel. Now, this is USA Today claiming that this is what Tea Partiers are. The Tea Party has pushed the GOP to the right. Oh, really? Let's see what those senators are doing now. The Tea Party has pushed them to the right. Aha, he moved from 31% in 2007 to 78% in 2010. Now we have a true conservative. That's an acceptable score. I mean, you know, no one can be perfect. He moved from 37 to 67. He moved from 69 to 92. Our liberal Democrat moved from 28 to 50%. And here we have a man that's new on the block, 90%, 90%. And we have 40%, 90%. Did the Tea Party push these people to the right? Well, that's what they claimed in the USA newspaper. Now let's try another measuring standard. We're talking about standards. We just measured them according to the Constitution. Let's measure them according to the Bible. Oh, you mean the Bible has a standard that applies to politicians? Do you think that's possible? Well, how about the Ten Commandments? Do we expect a politician to follow the Ten Commandments? Sure, let's apply the standard. Using the open Bible as the standard, measure a broken oath with the Ten Commandments. Exodus chapter 20. Thou shalt not bear false witness. Now, apply that to these senators we just had on the screen. I swear that I will uphold and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, both foreign and domestic. And they get 30%, or 69%, or 90%. Did they keep their oath? No, they violated number 9 of the Ten Commandments. Thou shalt not steal. They steal anything? Oh my goodness, trillions of dollars they steal. Every time they throw their hand up or push the button, however they make their vote, and they send billions here and billions there around the world to the poor, to the rich. They bail out the banks. If that isn't theft, nothing can be called theft. They stole. And who did they steal from? From us, from our unborn grandchildren. How about thou shalt not covet? Is that not coveting when they want your money to use it for their unjust cause? How about this one? Thou shalt not take the name of the Lord thy God in vain. How does the president end his oath and many other places where they end their oath? They end their oath with what words? So help me God. That makes me cringe even to say it out loud. And think that they're holding their hand up and swearing in the name of their Creator that they will honor and obey this principle, the Constitution, and then they know they're going to violate it in the next breath. Now there's one more they violate. How many commandments are there? If they violate 5 of 10, isn't that a significant thing to consider? If my mother thought I was voting unconstitutional, do you think she'd be proud of me? No, I would hope not. And my dear old father, he loved the Constitution. His cut-up hand is a great blessing to our lesson plan. Do you suppose these senators and representatives that vote unconstitutionally have a mother and a father? Honor thy father and thy mother. Do you think they're bringing honor upon their father and mother by violating their oath of office? No. This is a standard by which we can measure issues and candidates. Most people think the battle is conservatives versus liberals, when it is actually originalist versus living constitutionalist. That's his language. I kind of like the language. The Conservative Mind, a book written in 1953, defines a conservative. Now, if you really want to know what a conservative is, go to this is considered one of the finest sources of explanation that was ever printed. The Conservative Mind. What is a conservative? I'm not one in the use of the word today, but I would be one in the use as it was originally intended when I was a little boy. And a conservative from that book, a person who believes in an enduring moral order. The Ten Commandments will always apply. Thou shalt not steal will always be a law of God, and so forth. Strict adherence to the original intent of the Constitution of the United States. A free economy, a mind-our-own-business foreign policy. They believed war was the enemy of the Constitution, liberty, and economic security. And now we have wars around the world with troops in over 700 locations in 130 foreign countries. That's not conservative. 1976 to 1983, something phenomenal took place in America. A very, very rare and unusual and unique thing. I tell you, it was astonishing when I finally saw this and realized there was a Democrat and a Republican who were true conservatives. 2 out of 535 men were voting 100% in support of the Constitution every time. 2. It's a horrible percentage, but it's thrilling to think that the 2 men were willing to stand up for what was right, and one was a Democrat. Who were they? Yeah, Larry McDonald and Ron Paul. What great heroes they are. Larry McDonald, I knew them both, I met them both, I visited them one-on-one with them both. I'm just delighted to have had that privilege. Larry McDonald, he became the president of the John Birch Society. Hey, think about that now. A congressman who was president of the John Birch Society, and he was eventually murdered. Who murdered him? Soviet Union. They sent a jet up and blew up the airplane he was on. Aren't you just telling a fiction story from some... No, this is what happened. This guy was a great guy. How did we get to him? He's disgusting. I guess we'll just have to go to him. I was the speaker. I was the keynote speaker at the very, very prestigious dinner in Davis County. Davis County? Who's from Weber County here today? Where are you? Right there. I was the speaker at the Lincoln Day dinner about 4 years ago. Do you know the Lincoln Day dinner? Ever hear of it? It's a big Republican gathering. People wear their finest clothing. They have huge piles of food mounted on the tables with signs on them that said, donated by Senator Orrin Hatch. Really, that happened. I was there. And he was the first speaker. Now, he didn't have time to stay, or he'd have been the keynote speaker, I'm sure. And so they asked me to give the keynote address. He had to go to another meeting where another table was piled and he could give a speech there. And he stood up and he said, we should be thankful that this country is being blessed and led by a great conservative president, George W. Bush. And the greatest president that ever lived was Abraham Lincoln, the founder of the Republican Party. Can you think of any more lies can be given in 2 sentences? Pretty good job. Anyway, this is not conservative. This is not conservative. Not at all. I am a compassionate conservative, he declared one time. What is a compassionate conservative? I am a conservative futurist, Newt Gingrich declared one time. A conservative futurist. What kind of conservatives are there? Well, futurism in the dictionary I looked in was a study of how to impose controls on events in the future. I am a person who wants to control the future. Impose controls on... Interesting, this is what they did. Communism without a let's just skip past this. It gets, oh, here we go. Paleo-conservative, solid conservative, neo-conservative, compassionate conservative, conservative futurist. And that's why I said, don't ever call me a conservative. I want nothing to do with these people. 100%. He served until 1983. He wrote this book, We Hold These Truths, a reverent review of the U.S. Constitution. I enjoy the book. In there he wrote the dedication to the coming generation of Americans, with the prayer that they will restore the constitutional principles we have abandoned, protect the freedoms we have neglected, and preserve the republic we have almost lost. He vanished September the 1st, 1983, when the Soviets shot down the airplane in which he was going to a meeting in Korea. So we have socialist Bernie Sanders with his method of index. We have an originalist Ron Paul. Now, originalist is a better descriptive term. That means they want to strictly abide by the just and holy principles of the original Constitution. That's what that means. 100%. We have these people today. Can you distinguish a statesman from a politician? Okay, we hear lots and lots of speeches. The news is completely, you can't get away from it. Every day it's always the Republican this and the blah, blah, blah. Which one is truly a statesman and which one is just a loudmouth politician? Tragedy and Hope, written a long time ago. Carol Quigley, senator, not senator, it was congressman, senator, president. Get his right name. President Clinton. William Jefferson Clinton praised this man as his great mentor when he went to the university. Put Carol Quigley in position. He wrote in his book, his book's a big book, on page 1247 for those that are taking notes. It says, The Democratic and Republican parties should be almost identical so that the American people can throw the rascals out at any election without leading to any profound or extensive shift in policy. It doesn't matter which party has the presidency. They will still continue to lead us down the road to socialism. This illustration, a political caricature, shows an elephant sitting by a donkey in the culture of corruption bar and grill, and the elephant says, "Fancy meeting you here." And the donkey says, "Oh, shut up." And what are they drinking? Jefferson on the rocks. I can assure you that's Thomas Jefferson. And so we have the Republicans and the Democrats changing positions. And then this quotation from the New American, which I respect. In matters of fundamental political principle, they differ not a whit. So will it change anything if we elect a president that's a Republican instead of a Democrat? Oh, but I'm for, name these candidates, all but the exception of Ron Paul. I don't think he could change it. All he can do is get in there and veto a few things, and I'm not sure what would happen, but he would be by far my choice of a great hero. The rest are just a bunch of politicians. How should I vote? What is God's criteria? Voting is not about winners and losers, but about obeying God. Our choice is to vote according to God's will and be blessed, or vote according to our will and be cursed. God told me who to vote for. Really? Yeah, He did. God requires 4 qualifications in a civil servant. Exodus chapter 18, verse 21. Write it down. Go home and ponder on it before you vote next week. Moreover, thou shalt provide out of all the people able men, such as fear God, men of truth, hating covetousness. Able men, physically fit, mentally awake, and morally straight. Such as fear God, humble and teachable. Men of truth, true to their God, their family, and their country. Who hate covetousness. They do not ardently desire other people's property. How should we then vote? Following the destruction of the original electoral college system, the party system developed, which has the nature of offering on the ballot the lesser of 2 evils. Oh, my sister says, we have to vote. But I'm sorry, we have to vote for the lesser of 2 evils. There's no other choice. Is that our only choice? Voting for the lesser of 2 evils? I would normally develop this for another 20 minutes, but I can see the clock clicking by. I have a beautiful sweetheart that's going to meet me soon out front. I have a date with a woman that once was a beautiful redhead. Now it's kind of changed. And I kissed her this morning and she says, "Go give it to him." And she went to the mall. No, I'm teasing. She actually went somewhere else. Okay, let's see if there's any last statements up here that we if we were going to vote for the lesser of 2 evils, which would you vote for? Which one would you which is the lesser of the 2 evils here? Thank you. Hitler is. Some people say they would vote for Stalin because Hitler was so evil because he killed so many people. Well, Hitler was like, a Sunday school teacher compared to Stalin. So yes, you're right. Hitler is the lesser. So I'd have to vote for Hitler and have my, that's how it'd be if we voted for the lesser of 2 evils. There's got to be a good ending to this lesson. There's a presidential plate. Oh, Grover Cleveland. Sure, where did he rank in the presidencies? Number 2, Grover Cleveland. Here's Grover Cleveland for you. Grover Cleveland was faithful to the Founders' Constitution and to what he believed were God's commandments and common sense. He vetoed 584 bills. The nonsense that Congress was trying to pass, he was able to thwart. And he said, "I can find no warrant for such an appropriation in the Constitution." This is the comment he made following vetoing the bill where Congress had just passed a bill to send $10,000 to the drought-stricken farmers of Texas. Well, that's a noble cause. $10,000 is insignificant. And those poor drought-stricken... And he vetoed that? What a hard-hearted ogre. Grover Cleveland. "I ought to have a monument over me when I die, not for anything I have ever done, but for the foolishness I have put a stop to." It's been an honor to be with you today. I would welcome an invitation to come back if anyone was willing to listen to some future event.